Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we ponder a domain without answer, only mystery. And that's the domain of human nature as it's refracted through human culture. And I want to tell you how motivated I am to share some thoughts, because these came out of the presentation I did last week on the secret of the golden flower. The secret of the golden flower is a very ancient Chinese spiritual text going back thousands of years in the Chinese culture and tradition. And I was making the point as I was commenting on the secret of the golden flower that Karl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist of the 20th century, wrote a commentary for the secret of the golden flower. He was a friend of Richard Wilhelm, who had translated the book. And in his commentary, Jung makes the point that the reason why the Western civilization and the Abrahamic religions have been so extraordinarily violent and destructive, far more so than Eastern civilization and the indigenous traditions and the civilizations in the global South, is due to the fact that while the rest of the world has a container for the opposites, Western civilization and the Abrahamic religions do not. And the essential point that he makes is that if you're holding the contradictions, but there's no overarching container, the contradictions fall apart and you naturally cling to one polarity against the other. I'm chosen. You are not. I'm the elect. I'm going to heaven. You're a disbeliever. You're going to hell. That's the result of a metaphysic of dualism where there's no container that holds both. So Jung found this immensely helpful in understanding the carnage of the First and Second World Wars and the Holocaust and the nuclear weapons used by the United States and Japan and all manner of cruelties coming out of the colonial period. So I address this as the context for understanding that the secret of the golden flower, which was really one of the originating texts for the Taoist notion of the Tao, within which the yin and the yang dance together. They're always shape-shifting, because at the heart of every yin is yang, and the heart of every yang is yin, in perpetual motion, a perpetual dance of the opposites, contained by the Tao, contained by wholeness. And that's what allows one to engage in conscious journeying through life, because that which holds all the opposites and is unmoving is what directs the opposites toward the proper goal. When we were in the after chat, someone asked the question as we were coming to an end, well, what about Genghis Khan? What about all the cruelties in Eastern civilization, which are not insignificant? And in part because there wasn't time, in part because I wanted to honor the question. I said I want to ponder that before I answer. So I've been pondering, and I would like to share with you now how I understand what the prophet Isaiah called the evil inclinations of the human heart. Within the context of how we understand human nature and how human nature is refracted through culture. And I want to say in advance that I know not of that which I'm going to say, and that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. We all, from before the beginning and after the end, dwell in the mystery. And the greatest mystery in the cosmos is, who are we really? We humans. Who are we? What is our original face? What is our deepest nature? Well, here are my reflections. It's generally considered that there are two orientations to what constitutes human nature. The Taoist tradition, for example, conceives of human nature as good. The Hindu way of looking at things, that is also the case, that the Atman of each of our individuality is in fact the same as the great Brahman, that the microcosm is the same as the macrocosm. And it's all a refraction of all that is. Those that don't understand that are considered ignorant. In the Jewish tradition, one of the originating impulses was around the notion of hubris, the notion of ill use of will that causes the original sin. In the Christian tradition, the Orthodox Augustinian Christian tradition, humanity is completely fallen. And our natures from before birth, since the fall of Adam, have been tainted such that it is impossible, except through grace, for a human being to attain gnosis or to attain heaven when we die. So this notion of original sin, or this notion of original blessing, whether our actions in variance with the cosmic order are a result of ignorance, or there is a result of arrogance. Who's to say? I would like to offer another perspective, which you don't hear about very much, but which to me resonates with the deepest part of what I intuit human nature to be. It's drawn from the Greek mythology. from the story of Prometheus that I'm going to return to later on in my remarks. But for now, I want to recall, I want to remember the story that the Greeks told about the origin of humanity. It was Prometheus, one of the Titans, that was commissioned by Zeus, the head of the Olympian gods, with much grumbling by Zeus, to create humanity, which Prometheus created out of the dust. Prometheus had a brother, Epiprometheus, which means afterthought or no thought or absent-mindedness. And Prometheus had also created sort of the rest of creation here on Earth. And he told Epiprometheus, the forgetful one, to give all the animals, everything that he had created, their essence. What is it that they could do that would give them the capacity to survive and procreate? So the birds, he gave wings. And the fish, he gave fins so they could swim in the sea. The tigers and the lions, he gave big claws and teeth so they could protect themselves and eat things. And of all the creatures that were created, he gave some talent or some weapon, some tool that was part of who and what they were, so that they could survive in creation. The one species, the one creature that Prometheus completely forgot to give an essential quality to was humankind. So our origin, we have existence, but no essence. I want everyone to just ponder that for a moment and consider what Prometheus did about that. It's an extraordinary story. Once Prometheus realized that Epiprometheus had forgotten to give humanity its essence, he reached out to Athena. And you may remember that Athena was born through an act of Prometheus. You may remember the story emerging out of the third eye of Zeus. Prometheus came with his axe and split Zeus's forehead, and out came Athena, fully formed, the goddess of wisdom and the goddess of war. That's very important to remember about Athena, that wisdom and war. I'm going to return to that. I just want to flag it. And Prometheus said to Athena, we need to give humanity its essence. And Athena reached out and manifested a butterfly and put that in the soul of humankind. The essential insight of the Greeks is that because humanity has existence but not essence, we are the one species who can metamorph into higher and higher form. That transmutation of existence is the essence of humanity. That we're not good or bad. We are what we are, and our capacity to change is what characterizes our nature. When I read that, for me, I said, that feels right. The other part of this story is that Prometheus, after Athena had instilled the butterfly in our hearts, went up and stole fire from the gods and brought down fire that gave humanity the capacity to develop technology, something that no other species can do with any sophistication. It's true that chimpanzees have been seen to use sticks to poke into the termites, and there's very crude instrument utilization among other species, but none of the species can build a spaceship that can go to the moon or a supercomputer. That is the domain only of humans. So when we think of what it is that constitutes what we are, I believe the Greeks had the fundamental insight that humans are basically evolutionary beings who've been gifted a capacity to use technology. And that, if you think about it, characterizes the human journey. Humans all over this planet use technology to subdue the planet. Humans all over are continually adapting. We're the only species that can adapt in every weather, every situation. Why? Because we can control technology. The fire and the butterfly. That's us. And if you've read David Grieber's book, The Dawn of Everything, one of the masterworks of our generation, which I recommend to everybody, The Dawn of Everything. He and his co-author, forget his co-author's name. His first name is David Weeder, I think, point out that there's no inevitability to patriarchy. There's no inevitability to the way humans have oriented their social and political and economic structures to mediate their internal relations and the relationship with the larger natural ecology. There have been agricultural societies that have been democratic and authoritarian. There have been indigenous societies, Stone Age societies that have had slaves and not had slaves, that have valued rituals and have had virtually no rituals, that have lived in cities and don't live in cities. And the essential point that the dawn of everything makes is that there's no givenness to the human condition. There's no fate like there is if you're born a tiger or, a centipede, where you're fated to be what you were born to be. Humans don't have that restriction. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And to me, that understanding is the most liberating and inculcates in my psyche and soul the deepest sense of accountability for the changes that I seek to make to cultivate my own onward journey. Because as I change, as I grow, as I refine, I'm becoming more quintessentially who Athena instilled me to become, the butterfly. So hold that thought for a minute, because I want to probe where it gets complicated. And that's culture. And that's this memory that I want to bring into the conversation, which both complicates everything, but explains everything at a deeper level than we have been given to believe. I want to start with some of the origin motifs of humanity's spiritual tradition. And I want to start with the oldest out of India, that Indo-European, Indo-Iranian origin out of which Sanskrit came and out of which the Vedas came and eventually the Upanishads came. What was that original view of what was going on here? And that original view was that there were two kind of cosmic intelligences that presided over everything. There were the Devas, headed up by Indra, and you can go to the Rig Veda and you can read all about Indra and the sacrifices and so forth and so on. And there were the Asuras, headed up by Varuna. And the Devas and the Asuras were in conflict. And the Devas stood for order. And if you read the Rig Veda, it's all about the sacrifices that you need to make to Indra and the various gods. And Indra is depicted as essentially as a cattle thief, and he does what he wants, and you need to just obey his dictates because that's just the way it is. And there's these Asuras over here that kind of stand for something else, and they're rather vague in the Vedic tradition, but they're opposed to the order that's established by the Devas. You find the exact same thing in virtually every other culture. And I want to return now to the Greeks, because the Greek mythology is the originating impulse of Western civilization. So that even as the Bible shaped the religious impulse, Greek mythology, Greek culture was the substrate that shaped the mythological scope of the civilization. And you have the same division between the Olympians, Zeus and Hermes and Apollo and, Aphrodite and Athena and so forth and so on the one hand. And then you have the Titans on the other hand. Prometheus, Atlas, Atlas that holds up the world at the entrance of the Mediterranean from the Atlantic, Rock of Gibraltar. He was a Titan. And the Titans, like the Asuras and the Devas in Indian civilization, were at war with each other. Sometimes they colluded, sometimes they were in conflict, but they were always in a dialectical relationship with each other. And Zeus stood for order, but he was capricious. He would take different animal forms and rape women. He would demand certain things. He would trick people. He would lie to the other gods. He was unfaithful to his wife. If you look at the Olympian stories, like the stories of the Devas, the order that they insisted humanity adhere to through ritual was capricious, sadomasochistic, and sometimes certifiably insane. And that was a problem in the mind. And it was Prometheus, against the will of Zeus, that created humanity. And while Zeus wanted to enslave humanity, it was Prometheus and Athena who he got to come with him. And then with fire, and humanity was liberated on its way. You have the ancient mythology of the Sumerians, same thing. You have two brothers in this case. Enlil, the big brother, wants humanity to be slaves to the gods. And Enki, like Prometheus, wanting to liberate humanity into higher forms through the use of technology. And it was Prometheus and Enki and Varuna in the East that taught humanity the arts and the sciences against the will of the gods, who wanted to really just enslave us through ritual and blind obedience. In Mesoamerica, you have Quetzalcoatl, a Promethean figure, an Inky figure who comes to teach humanity the arts, to give them fire, and to teach them how to build the pyramids. So in extraordinary development, there's this memory in our collective psyche of a time way, way, way back before we even have history, that there were these beings fighting over how to develop humanity. It's an extraordinary collective memory. It's as common as the flood. There's hundreds of traditions about a flood somewhere back, and only a small remnant survives. Now I want to introduce you to Zarathustra, Zoroaster. By all accounts, he lived in the 7th century BC. He lived in Persia. And he grappled with this basic contradiction between the Devas and the Asuras and the Olympians and the Titans and the Sumerian myths. And he had a fundamental insight that shaped certainly Western civilization in a powerful way. He said, wait a minute. It's not the Devas that are truly the gods. It's the Asuras. It's not Zeus and the Olympians. It's Prometheus and the Titans that are really where humanity should align. And in Zoroaster, if you know your Zoroastrianism, he has this cosmic differentiation between Ahriman, Zeus, Enki, Indra, that Zoroaster said they're the ones that we need to watch out for. They're seeking to control humanity, subordinate us through rituals that are mindless, and telling us that we can't become who we most naturally are as butterflies. And it's within this context that I want to turn to the book of Genesis. Because here we have played out this storyline. Who's going to control humanity? How do we understand nature and culture? If you go back to the book of Genesis, those opening chapters of the book that has shaped Western civilization and much of the world, you find a very interesting variant of the story. In this case, Yahweh, the Olympian, Zeus, Indra, he creates the world. He creates humanity, Adam out of the dust, Eve out of one of the ribs of Adam. And like in the Sumerian myth of the Anunnaki, puts the humans to work. Their job was to tend the garden. And every night toward dusk, he would come and check to see how they were doing. And then one day, the wisest creature that the Lord God had made the serpent, Satan, slithers in and says to Eve, why is it that God says that you can't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why is it that you can't eat of the tree of life? You can. And if you do, you will become as gods. And in an extraordinary act of chutzpah, freedom, Eve takes a bite. Adam takes a bite. And their complete reality changed. And then the Lord God comes toward the end of the day, and he realizes that something is wrong because they had realized their nakedness and covered themselves up with fig leaves, they says. And they were cast out of the garden so that the Olympian order could be maintained. And that the Adam and Eve were considered evil and considered wrong and had been punished. But the basic plot of divine order and human will and human transformation, inspired by the Titans, inspired by the Asuras, inspired by Prometheus, drove us out of the garden and has enabled us to create our own garden. So when we think of this current extraordinary revelation that's coming about the extraterrestrials, the story I just told is the deep memory that human beings have been tinkered with, that basic butterfly capacity to morph and transmute has been tampered with, both by those forces that seek to enslave and by those forces who seek to elevate. And that is the crucible of what is going on. And it's very interesting to me to observe that Freud made the observation. He says that the moment you're born, you forget the universe. And if you go back into the Sumerian myth of how Enlil sought to enslave humanity, he tinkered with our genes to make us completely forgetful so we don't learn from our mistakes. And our forgetfulness in the Sumerian way of thinking about things is partly responsible for why we make so many mistakes, because we literally can't remember Think about that. It's a profound insight. So that as we consider human nature and human culture, we need to bear in mind that the evolutionary progression that has brought us to where we are has not been unfettered, has not been completely free of cosmic influences, and both malevolent and benevolent genetic engineering. And I believe that one of the things that we will be coming to understand as people like Graham Wilcox and the archaeology at Göbekli Tepe and all the different uncoverings, is we're realizing that not only is human history much more deeply embedded in the planetary past. We go back 200 to 300,000 years, maybe. Maybe we go back millions of years. The planet's been around for 4.5 billion years. And there's been this epic rise and fall of human civilization over time. And what we're beginning to come to realize through Graham Wilcox more than anyone is that the deluge that wiped out the previous civilization that happened about 12,000 years ago, the little dry eyes, it's called, wiped out Atlantis, wiped out human civilizations that were probably more advanced than we are now today. And then for thousands of years, the waters covered the earth. I was reading just the other day that in the Gulf of Mexico, they're finding hundreds of feet under the water on the ocean floor, roads, leftovers of buildings. So that as we learn to remember and we overcome our forgetfulness through the archaeology, and as we begin to interact with the extraterrestrials, many of whom have been telling this story to various people that have been experiencing the ETs. So what I'm saying to you isn't something I just made up. I think this is going to be gaining currency as we gain in our capacity to really engage in sustained, sophisticated conversation with these extraterrestrials, which, as you know, Ubiquity University and our ET studies program is designed to facilitate. We'll be discovering more and more of ourselves that will fill out this notion of who we most essentially are. And why it is that many believe, the Gnostics, a woman yesterday on Humanity Rising talking about the Urantia book, that somehow this is a prison planet, that the local suzerain archons who control this planet in the Urantia mythology, we are part of a rebellion of cosmic proportions. And that not only our planet, but I think she was saying up to 38 other planetary systems were part of that revolt. And that part of the ET presence now is benevolent beings seeking to right again the moral equilibrium that has gotten significantly out of kilter with the natural order. So I think that we're in a deliciously wonderful moment in terms of human history, where the evil inclinations of the human heart are apparent everywhere. And that capacity of humans to morph, to transmute by holding the contradictions, to create the heat that ignites the alchemical fire of transformation. That's also happening. And so when we look back over time and we see that, yes, Eastern civilization had the Tao and therefore modulated its atavistic instincts more sustainably, shall we say, over time, but didn't negate them entirely. And that the Abrahamic religions took it in a different direction with the metaphysic of dualism. Those are the ways different human cultures have refracted this essential butterfly nature as it's been genetically engineered by superior intelligences in primordial time. I think that's the basic storyline here, which is very exciting to contemplate. Very exciting to contemplate. Which leads me to the final point that I want to make, and that is as we move forward now, there is a particular urgency in inculcating those practices that enable metamorphosis. It's not that we need to meditate so that we kind of blank the world out, although that can be a useful tool. The takeaway from what I've just said is that in some extraordinary way, our planet is both a battleground and a training ground. It's both that place where the cosmos has come with particular intensity of intention. And we little humans, which are the focus, the focus of all this, what do we need to do? We need to keep changing, everybody. We need to keep the metamorphosis going. And this is one reason why I'm so excited about the ET studies program, because, like, for example, I'm learning remote viewing right now. I'm learning mental telepathy. I want to talk to these beings. I want to ask them a lot of questions, because I'm sure many of them were there in the primordial soup that created the contradiction that is our humanity. I want to know a lot more about that. And that act of learning ET, learning the mother tongue, upgrading ourselves so that we can become fluent in consciousness at this moment, in my view, is the single challenge confronting humanity. Because to the degree to which we can transmute our interior to higher and higher frequencies. That's what's going to enable us to transmute the external chaos into something beautiful. But metamorphosis, not good or evil, in my view, is our essential nature. And while different cultures have modulated or exacerbated our basic tendencies, as Jung pointed out, we now are challenged to make the greatest leap humanity's ever made and enter, having been enchained by the material world, to jump into the ocean of consciousness and become fluent in consciousness and begin to be able to speak from our autonomy and our sovereignty with those beings who heretofore we have considered the gods. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me the pleasure to provide these few random thoughts on human nature and human culture. It's so exciting to be alive. It's exciting to be part of this community. There's so much more that can be said, but I just wanted to honor the question of the gentleman who triggered this discourse last week, and want to honor the secret of the golden flower, out of which all transmutation emerges. I'm happy to join the after chat for a little bit for those of you who want to go a little bit deeper. And then I want to say, I'm also very excited about next week. Next week, we're going to be taking 5 days, and we are going to honor the fact that Robert Kennedy Jr. is now the Secretary of Health and Human Services of the United States, and is made as one of his central priorities a reevaluation of the vaccines and human health. So for 5 days next week, Monday through Friday, we're going to have a team of extraordinary specialists reconsider the pandemic and the vaccines and the chronic illnesses that have made the American public the unhealthiest country in the world. So that's next week. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Bye for now.